The biggest battle in MMO culture isn't this MMO versus that MMO, it's horizontal progression versus vertical progression, and both sides decry the other as being the worst system. But both have benefits, both have pros, and both have cons. The issue is, in the context of Classic Plus, what is actually a good system? So we're going to deep dive and break down horizontal versus vertical, give examples on why one is better than the other, and see what's actually the future of MMOs in this context. So right off the bat, what is horizontal versus what is vertical progression? Horizontal is you get gear, and that gear is forever relevant. You have old school RuneScape, you have Guild Wars 2. Then you have vertical progression, which is your Final Fantasy 14, it is your World of Warcraft retail. And you have the in-between, for example games like Classic WoW, where the vertical progression does happen from raid to raid to raid, but the horizontal progression is available from the get-go. For example, Onslaught, Girdle, Quick Strike, Ring, you have your Thunder Fury, items that are relevant to the entire expansion, the entire experience itself. Now, the big issue here is, vertical progression has major issues once you get the game to progress long enough. For in this context, Naxxramas. Almost every item from Naxxramas is better than every item that came before. There are very few exceptions to this rule. Certain classes might have different items that aren't that good of an upgrade in Naxxramas, but for the bulk of classes, Naxxramas is a flat upgrade on almost every single piece. But you can still use your Onslaught Girdle, you can still use your DFT, you can still use other items from previous raids. Now what happens when in Classic Plus they go to the 5th raid tier? Will Onslaught Girdle or DFT or these other items still even be remotely relevant because Naxxramas is such a proper power jump, but not excessively so? Naxxramas isn't like a retail seasonal reset where you go from season 2 to season 3, where season 3 is 50 eye levels higher. It's only marginally an eye level increase, and also only like a 15-20% flat increase. So it begs the issue of, when it comes to horizontal progression and vertical progression, when is too far and when is too little? Now before I dive more into that, I do want to discuss horizontal progression a little more. In horizontal progression in a game like Guild Wars 2, back in 2013, I got full BIS gear, right? Now it's technically no longer the full BIS gear, but there is very little gear that is actually an upgrade for me in Guild Wars 2. If I was to go back and play Guild Wars 2, and I do this every year or 2 years to the new expansion and try it out, there isn't any real gear upgrade. Like sure I could farm the most epitome perfect stat this, but it's not going to make me that much stronger, if at all. Guild Wars 2, despite having an amazing game, amazing systems, like for example Dragon Flying and Retail WoW stolen from Guild Wars 2, the horizontal progression is a major turnoff for a lot of people because there is no more power progression for your character. Power has been capped for 13 years, 14 years, since its launch effectively. But then you have old school RuneScape on the other end of it, where it doesn't focus on endgame in the same way that other MMOs do with raiding, group content and this. It focuses on endgame with challenges, personal gameplay, personal modes of play. How you play the game, the skills you farm, the challenges you proceed to do, for example Questcape, and things of that nature. Old school RuneScape is the perfect example of horizontal progression done in a way that is completely different from other MMOs. Because the gameplay takes you down isn't this whole new like, oh my god, new raid, new weapon, new this, new that. It's new challenges, new boss mechanics, new systems, new skills. And most MMOs don't do it like old school RuneScape does. So now we got that out the way. We have proper examples of vertical and proper examples of horizontal. Classic Plus, and what exactly do people say they want versus what people actually want. If we look at the Classic playbase as a whole, people always scream to the heavens, horizontal progression, Classic Plus needs horizontal progression. If you don't give me horizontal progression, Classic Plus is dead. When you ask them to define horizontal progression, they literally describe vertical progression that's disguised as horizontal progression. That's the major issue when it comes to developing a game like Classic Plus, is that people want to feel the power creep. They want to feel the power bump. They want to feel like they're getting rewarded for their time put in, but they don't want to get vertical progression. They want the whole thing handed to them and disguised and packaged in a way that makes them feel better playing an older style game without modern conveniences and modern features. Now, this isn't to say every single modern feature is bad. Oh my god, quality of life, how dare you want to enjoy gaming? That's a terrible take to have for a lot of people who hate every convenience. But Classic WoW is a grindy game, And by virtue of being grindy, horizontal progression does fit more, but people don't want alternative challenges. They want raiding scene to continue and continue to continue. So it becomes this weird like counterbalancing point of you can't have both. You can't have your cake and eat it too in this context. So we're going to break down Classic Plus and what it looks like if it was horizontal versus vertical. If Classic Plus was a vertical game, by phase 5, we're just going to call it Scarlet Enclave, right? By phase 5, Molten Core and Blackwing Lake for the most part will be almost completely invalid gear-wise. By phase 6, and we're going to call this Hyjal, by phase 6, AQ and the portions of Nax will be invalid. By phase 7, Nax and AQ will be completely invalid. So let's say phase 7 is Grimbatol. By Grimbatol, nobody will be running pretty much Molten Core through Naxxramas. They'll be doing phase 5, 6, and 7. To save phase 5 gear, Scarlet Enclave gear, and some Hyjal gear will be relevant into phase 7. So that makes the first 4 raid tiers completely forgotten for a lot of people. Now keep in mind, in Classic Plus, they're not going to do Molten Core through Naxxramas back to back. They're going to sprinkle raid tiers in between. But for the context of this video, I'm just going to treat it like phase 1 to 4 is Molten Core to Nax. In this vertical progression reality, by phase 8, let's say phase 8 is Caverns of Time, the Siege of Stormwind, right? By phase 8, Scarlet Enclave gear will start to become irrelevant or mostly irrelevant. And then by phase 9 and 10 and 11, the previous raid tiers become irrelevant and all that content gets forgotten, and that is vertical progression. Now, there are ways to mitigate that, but that is what vertical progression is for the most part. Classic players want gear to continue, just not forever. They want gear to potentially get upgraded, gear to potentially become more relevant, maybe a token, maybe this. But nobody's actually thinking about a 10-year plan. They're thinking about Classic Plus in the perspective of 2, 3, maybe 4 years as an example. But if Classic Plus is a forever going game, never ending, phase 12, phase 13, phase 14 is in the future. So what do? Do they do a stat squish? Do they do an item eye level squish? It becomes an issue on that front. Now, I'm gonna give you guys an example. I'm not saying this is a perfect example of how to make vertical progression feel like horizontal. Once we get to, say, for example, phase 7 or phase 6, we get to Hyjal and Grimbatol. They make Molten Core through Blackwing Lure AQ40, 10-man UBRS level dungeons, or 20-man ZG/AQ20 dungeons, or raids, mini raids. So it becomes more accessible, it's fun content, people can still go back and run that stuff, but it's no longer as difficult. They lower the health, the mechanics, make those raids an easier experience. They leave the OGs available for people, but the gear there is no longer relevant because it's no longer relevant. And instead of going through UBRS or this or that, you're now leveling your characters through Molten Core and 20 mans or 10 mans or whatever equivalent. Is that a perfect solution? Absolutely not. But that is what vertical progression will end up leading to. When the content becomes no longer necessary to play, the majority of the player base will no longer play that content. It's simply a factual thing. By the time you get to Naxxramas, Molten Core goes from being run hundreds of times per day to perhaps dozens of times. By Scarlet Enclave or whatever, in like Sword of the Future, it'll become almost impossible to find a group short of some transmog runs or things of that nature. But at the same time, vertical progression doesn't necessarily mean you have to have a giant retail level or TBC, classic to TBC or TBC to Wrath level, eye level jump. It can be progressive, but no matter how progressive it is, no matter how horizontal progression minded it is, at a certain point there will be a cutoff for content and it'll no longer be run. And that's the major issue with vertical. You can sugarcoat it, you can hide it, you can make those old content relevant as dungeons, heroic plus, mythic plus, whatever the hell you want to throw in there. But the vertical progression will lead to that issue in the future. Now we have horizontal progression. And horizontal progression is different in a whole different area, in the sense that in a horizontal progression raid, in a horizontal progression gameplay environment, Molten Core is relevant in phase 12. So that means you as a player log on, and Molten Core, Blackwing Lure, AQ40, Naxxramas, Scarlet Enclave, Hyjal, Grimbatol, Caverns of Time again, Upper Hyjal, this, that, the On the Mountain, whatever raid is, it's all relevant at the same time. That is horizontal progression. For example, in old school RuneScape, if the math is correct, and correct me if I'm wrong in the comment, it takes about 87 years or 97 years to finish every single thing in old school RuneScape. It's legitimately impossible. It's not gonna happen. I think that's game time as well, not just real life years. Actual in-game time of 97 something years to do everything in old school RuneScape. That'll become a problem and it'll drive a lot of people away. in the classic mentality, in the classic mindset, because people want to do everything. That's how a lot of classic players, how a lot of WoW and like vertical progression gamers like to play their MMOs. Now, at the same time, if 12 raid tiers are relevant, how do you make people pick the right one? And how do you make 12 raid tiers relevant, but you give people 0 power progression? Because I'm gonna be real, if Molten Core is the same gear as the 12th raid tier, I'm only running that 12th raid tier for cosmetic effect, the new tier set is slightly better or slightly more efficient for the farm I'm doing, or things of nature. You have to give people a reward, an incentive to want to do something when everything is completely relevant at the same time. You can add harder mechanics, make it get progressively harder and harder mechanics and health wise, so despite the bosses not necessarily dropping better loot, the cosmetics look better, the gear looks better, and to get that gear you have to become a better and better and better player. That is horizontal in a way that a lot of people would like, but at the same time a lot of people won't really run raids just for cosmetics, especially when it's that difficult and that time consuming and that like difficult for people to actually sink their time and energy into. So across the board, you can see that in horizontal progression, the issue doesn't come from the fact that there's too much content. It comes from the fact that why would people do all the content when nothing rewards you with more power? Now, there's no good solution to this, and I have to be very real about it. I think for Classic Plus and for any future MMO, you need to have a game that is vertical progression, but is packaged as horizontal. You need to keep all the content forever relevant, but forever relevant in a way that doesn't disincentivize you from playing the game right now. Molten Core gear should still be relevant in Phase 12, as the new UBRS gear, as the new catch-up gear. They should be treating all the content as catch-up content that is still relevant into the modern raid scene. I'm leveling an alt, I'm gearing him up through Molten Core and Blackwing Lair. And at a certain point they should go back and revitalize that raid tier. Bring it back up to par, upgrade the gear a bit, do stat switches or eye level switches here or there. But the issue is there is no perfect methodology for a 10-year game. Most MMOs die within 4, 5, 6 years. Or they have Guild Wars 2 where the content is completely horizontal and people are playing for collecting, for new mounts, for new dynamic exploration, for new dynamic events. They're playing the game for completely different reasons than gear progression. And the classic community for the most part is a gear progression minded community. To break down the effective summary, vertical progression as is a bad system. It's retail WoW. And retail WoW is good for its own separate reasons, but it's not classic. Horizontal progression as it is bad system because if you look at old school RuneScape or Guild Wars 2, it is a whole different gameplay loop and gameplay dynamic compared to classic WoW. They are good in their own separate ways. Old school RuneScape is a good game, Guild Wars 2 is a good game, retail WoW is a good game, but not from the classic player perspective. It needs to be both. It needs to have challenges, heroic dungeons that don't give you, better gear, or heroic plus, or like in this context, mythic plus, but there is no gear reward from it. You can keep pushing yourself harder and harder and harder. You gotta get a better and better team to do these mythic pluses, and you only get a mount or a title or, I don't know, a pet for completing this seasonal challenge once a year, once every 6 months. They need to add horizontal progression gameplay loops that don't invalidate any vertical progression that happens. At the same time, vertical progression needs horizontal progression alongside it, so that people always feel like there's something to do and they're not just raid logging when they're done. Because raid logging is a huge issue in the classic community. You need to incentivize people to play the game by giving them systems, but not giving them so much that they're overwhelmed, they don't do most of the things. You need to make every challenge feel appealing in its own separate way. Keep in mind, old school RuneScape, when it came out at launch, was a dog shit game. It was absolutely a travesty shithole. Ask any old school RuneScape player that played back then. It wasn't a great game. It's amazing now, but it wasn't like that. Look at Guild Wars 2. It launched and came crashing and burning relatively fast. Most MMOs do, because it's very difficult to give everybody what they want. You have to pick a lane and commit to it. And that's what most games have figured out over the years. WoW is riding on the coattails of being World of Warcraft. It modernized the MMO genre compared to EverQuest and the previous iterations, and it's still riding on it because no game has revolutionized or modernized the MMO genre further in a way that is appealing to the masses. That became UGC with Minecraft, Roblox, this and that. So MMOs need to evolve in a way that feels appealing to the masses, but rewards the sweats. Casuals don't feel left behind. There is no rush to max level, but at max level there is a shit ton to do. So in my honest opinion, good fucking luck to the Classic WoW devs, because they're gonna fuck up no matter what they do. There's no universe in which they make Classic Plus and it comes out perfect, comes out everything amazing, comes out from the get-go, this shit is phenomenal. It's not really feasible. Because the Classic player base doesn't actually know what they want in Classic Plus, because it's a divided player base. Hey, but let me know in the comment section down below what you think. Do you want horizontal, vertical? What do you think is the correct mishmash, however you say it, of making all these systems work? Thank you all for watching. If you liked the video, like and subscribe. If you hated it, dislike and subscribe and be a dedicated hater. We don't half-ass our hate on this channel, we full-ass it. Thank you all. Ebonheart out. Peace.